Okay, so the title of my presentation is slightly different from what has been advertised. I will talk a little bit about global innovations, the kinds of challenges and the development trends that we're dealing today, and what their implications are to urban planning, as well as for planning education. And let me remind you about a very simple term on what planning was all about. The way planning was introduced to me about 10 years ago was that planning was the implication of what happened between the village of Euclid and Ambler Realty. And this was a very popular case in the United States in the very early years of the 1900s. When Ambler Realty's companies complained about Euclid Village zoning code that rules out their plan for industrial development. At that particular year, the Supreme Court ruled in favor of Euclid, and that began the early years of planning and the zoning in the United States. So in essence, if we really talk about planning, in its very simple terms, planning is about regulating spatially what people can and cannot do and where they can or cannot do what they actually want to do. So if you look at what planning has become as of today, you have to really consider what the global innovations in the world today are, how they present urban challenges to our cities, and what are the implications to planning and our planning education. So first, let me talk about global innovations. What are the things that have emerged in the 21st century when we lived as of today? First of all, I think it's very important to talk about the electrification of mobility. As of 2021, Tesla's share has become the most valuable in the world. Tesla has become the most valuable company in the world as of 2021. And Tesla's value was larger or have become larger than 4 of the biggest automobile corporations in the world if they're combined together. So Toyota, Ford, General Motors, and Volkswagen, these are 4 of the biggest automobile companies in the world. And that actually includes many other brands. So Toyota actually owns Daihatsu, for example. GM owns about 20 brands. Volkswagen owns companies such as Porsche and Lamborghini and Audi and so on and so forth. But even if these 4 biggest corporations merge into one very big corporation, they're not even more valuable than Tesla. And therefore, Elon Musk has become the richest person in the world. And this actually signifies new demand for electric cars. If you actually believe, if you actually believe in what shareholders' perspective actually mean about the demand, then this actually signifies a new demand for electric cars, and it opens road for electrification and electrification competitors. So in China, for example, we saw the development and the birth of NIO. In Europe, for example, we saw the development and the birth of Lucid, Polestar, and so on and so forth. This, unfortunately, is no longer true in 2023, right? Because now we're looking at a slower demand for electric cars in Europe. But this is kind of the trend that tells us that the future is for electric mobility. Okay, second thing is drone development. As of 2021, Amazon has experimented with drone delivery, and Dubai has started texting for drone taxi services. And what this tells us is that the future of people and goods mobility is not on the road, but is actually up in the air. And last but not least, if you really want to talk about global innovation, then it's important for us to talk about the development of robotics and the development of artificial intelligence. 5 years ago, when we say robots, what we have in mind are robots like the one on the right-hand side of this image, right? So robots have been considered as mindless automated machines. Whereas now, when we say robots, we don't actually talk about mechanical hard workers. We actually, with the development of AIs, we have started developing sapient robots, robots that have the ability to a certain extent and to a certain limits, the ability to think, right? And in places like Japan, for example, we have started seeing the development of socially interactive robots, where they can actually interact with people, doing jobs such as serving in restaurants or receiving orders, being a receptionist in offices, and so on and so forth. And it actually opens many possibilities, right? There are possibilities that robots in the future will replace human beings. And when they replace human beings, that actually means that there is going to be fewer jobs for us human beings, right? And that actually opens questions such as, what are the implications of the development of robots and AI to urban areas, to places like cities, where most of us are going to live after 2030. Next, I'm going to talk about urban challenges, right? And there are multiple challenges. First of all, we need to talk about health challenges, and then we have to talk about economic challenges, and what would be the implications of health and the economy, and the implications to our social relations. Of course, it's important to talk about the pandemic. It's not just the pandemic itself, but the rise of new diseases, the rise of new tropical diseases, the growth of discovery of new viruses that was non-existent 100 years ago, and the implications to urban centers. I did mention that AI is going to mean we have more cities but fewer jobs. But even without the development of AI, actually the job market has shifted for at a very significant rate. If you look at sources like PwC, for example, the PricewaterhouseCoopers, they have done studies on how AI could actually change the job market. We can see a potential decline in sectors such as manufacturing, transportation, public administration, and quite interestingly, even sectors such as wholesale and retail and construction that was previously very dependent on human beings to do workloads, now are going to rely more on artificial intelligence. And only sectors such as health, scientific and technical, communications and hospitality, as well as education, are the ones that are going to experience increase in demand. Most of other sectors are going to experience declines. What does this mean for our jobs in the future? In the future, by as early as 2030, people have predicted that AI and automation and robotics will create about 2.5 billion more jobs, but will eliminate 13.3 million jobs. So what that means is that we only create about 19% of new jobs, but at the same time, we're going to lose many, many more jobs to AI and robots in the future. What will be the implications to cities? How our urban environment will look like in the future, right? I think we're going to see a very different landscape of infrastructures in the future. I don't think we're going to see that many gas stations in the future. I think we're going to see multiple parking lots being provided with solar panels, and those parking lots are going to be provided with electric car charging facilities. And we're also going to see, in the outer skirts of cities, power plants like this, power plants that are going to be filled with acres and acres or square kilometers of just solar panels. We're going to start seeing this in the outskirts of our cities. And we're probably going to see a very rapid change of how our buildings going to look like. Most of our buildings are going to be equipped with solar panels, and we're probably not going to see a very similar type of roofs in the future as well. And the way we live are going to be different as well, because most of us are going to live vertically in apartments instead of in landed houses. With the development of drones, I think it will make sense that lobbies are not going to be located on the ground. It's very possible that in the very near future, we're going to see apartment lobbies, building lobbies to be located somewhere much higher than actually being located on the ground. And we're actually going to see electrical car charging to be located in many residential locations as well. What about our jobs? I think there's going to be the rise of artisans, and freelance jobs. There's going to be a lot more opportunities for people who are going to be doing arts, doing painting, doing tailored, handmade products. But our jobs are also not going to be that secure. There's going to be fewer, there's going to be much fewer full-time jobs. There's going to be a lot more freelance gigs, if I may. And most of us are going to be doing multiple jobs at the same time. So with those kinds of innovation, those kinds of challenges, how is planning going to change, and how planning education must change? I think if we consider planning as an activity of regulating what people can or cannot do and where they can or cannot place their activities, then I think we should consider much less on zoning, and we should think more about behavior. The way we regulate activities must evolve as human behavior also have shifted. The old kind of classifications of activities, such as placing offices, placing residential and commercial places, no longer fits. And I think planners must learn from sociologists, anthropologists, psychologists, and epidemiologists about the different trends of working, living, and leisure. Second, I think we need to promote mixed use and space sharing because people are going to do work from home much more, and their leisure spaces need to be much closer to the residential areas. And we need to be able to avoid the chances of people being trapped in a very small space, such as what has happened in the last pandemic. And next, I think it's important for us to teach our students about urban analytics, make them very familiar with data, especially geospatial data, and making them to understand and capable of doing analysis with data that has a very high resolution. Data that is very detailed, the data that is probably going to provide information on the land plot scale instead of an urban scale. So a little bit about the examples of what we have done here at Universitas Indonesia are studies about people's mobility and how people's mobility changes during the pandemics. So for example, this is data that we have used from Facebook's mobility data. And we can see from this data that we can easily estimate the increase of cases during the pandemic, the increase of COVID cases during the pandemic, and people's mobility during the mobility limitation periods. And we can see the correlation between people's mobility and the increase of cases of COVID during the pandemic. Very interesting study. Another study, another actually prototype that we have developed is what we call the Smart Land Surveillance System. The innovation that can integrate and synchronize, data from the city, data from the municipality, data from the land authority, from ATR BPN, and data that provides information on, for example, urban taxation. And this is a very good example on how we integrate big data and information systems into urban planning and urban analysis. So in this example, we try to integrate data from LiDAR and data from aerial photos and merge those data with existing geospatial data, and also integrate them with tabular data on, for example, taxes, to provide a three-dimensional cadastral data that will help us analyze the city based on the kinds of development and the kinds of physical development that has happened in the city, and its implication on urban taxation, urban property taxes. And we can also create estimates about, how the urban taxes, urban property taxes are going to increase over time as well. So that's what I can share about the future of planning, and I hope that can be useful for you. And I'm open to questions and discussions. So back to you, Nadia.